I wonder what the main idea behind this Rolling Thunder thing is, but I have no idea because it's not about nothing. This incident only occurred 40 years ago. The worst jerks in the 1960s folk culture are finally exposed by Bob Dylan today. Ignore the romantic picture. There was no Nirvana in Greenwich Village. It was a pit. Smoky cafes are a source of jealousy and ego. Like attack dogs, singers guarded the stage. The rule was betrayal. Their party was interrupted by Dylan, the tenacious Minnesota child who wouldn't bow. Rivalries didn't merely simmer in those basements. They blew apart, transforming the so-called folk family into a vicious competition between resentment and ambition. The folk culture of the 1960s was rife with animosity despite its outward appearance of fraternity. Dylan's quick ascent incited resentment, while some murmured that Dylan was too ambitious, too crafty, and too eager to take inspiration without giving credit. Others, like Dave Van Rock, regarded him as an opportunist. Initially his supporter and lover, Joan Baez, subsequently accused him of betraying him in his personal and professional life. These rivalries, which were complicated by power battles, love triangles, and backstage politics, were not only professional but also intensely personal. The image of pure folk was merely a mask. It was fueled by resentment, treachery, and human frailties. Consider the romantic conflicts that rocked Dylan's group, the partnerships where artistic and personal lives clashed, where peace quickly devolved into resentment. With their voices harmonizing flawlessly, Dylan and Joan Baez's courtship started out as a brilliant musical collaboration. However, fault lines were hidden beneath the splendor. While Dylan's restless nature drew him toward rock and creative experimentation, she wished to continue being the queen of folk purity, dedicated to causes and tradition. In addition to being a personal tragedy, their split represented the clash of two musical visions, the defiant prophet of change and the idealistic folk queen. With each song colored with hatred and longing, the stage that once brought them together became a battlefield. In the meantime, Dylan frequently left behind wounds, rumors, and resentment from his interactions with women in the town. Loyalty fell dissolved and affairs overlapped in packed clubs and smoke-filled apartments. As passion developed into treachery, friends became enemies and lovers into rivals. A web of shattered hearts was forged by love triangles between activists, poets, and musicians, which fueled more strife within the community. The village, which appeared to be a creative refuge, turned into a maze of retaliation and jealousy, where every snatched glance and whispered rumor added drama to Dylan's already chaotic life. Dylan's electrified night at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965 is recalled. However, the alcohol, the rage, and the betrayal went far beyond a single performance. The crowd that had hugged him now burst into astonishment. A chorus of dissatisfaction reverberated around the festival grounds as folk traditionalists denounced him as a traitor to the cause and a sellout. Come on. Okay, let's leave. I have no recollection of Rolling Thunder. All right. You know, it was so long ago that I wasn't even born. Well, yeah, what do you wish to know then? Some felt as if Dylan had torn the soul out of their movement, substituting chaos and disobedience for purity. According to rumors, Dylan's resistance infuriated Pete Seeger, who allegedly threatened to cut the wires if Dylan would stop the loud amplifiers from screaming. Intense and backstage rumors circulated that Dylan had betrayed not only them but also the fundamental essence of folk music, and other musicians mocked him for sacrificing authenticity for fame. Dylan saw the electric guitar as a naked, unreserved, and exhilarating symbol of freedom. Many in the folk world, however, saw it as the ultimate insult, a statement that their principles were out of date and unimportant. It wasn't just music that clashed, it was a generational divide between revolution and tradition, and it was ideological. Dylan was pitted against some of the biggest names and people who thought he was conceited and untrue to the movement because of that night, which left a wound that would never completely heal. Newport was more than just a show, it was a battleground, and Dylan left permanently changed by the maelstrom he had caused, both condemned and immortalized. Dylan's litany of disputes only got longer as his notoriety increased, and every victory was followed by another breakup. Ramblin'. Once a stage partner, Jack Elliott was envious of Dylan's quick rise to fame and muttered that Dylan had taken the limelight that belonged to the old guard. After one abrupt firing, Dylan's scathing remarks and unrelenting criticism degraded Phil Oakes, a ferocious campaigner and songwriter, to tears. Despite their previous friendship, Tom Paxton accused him of forsaking folk values and denounced him for prioritizing poetry and electricity over tradition and purity. Dylan had enemies even in the counterculture because of his erratic behavior and his candor. Singers muttered that he was untrustworthy, that one minute he would be on stage with them, the next he would be making fun of their art in public. When he left causes and protests when the world wanted him to take the lead, others felt deceived because he refused to become the voice of a generation on their terms. Others were envious of his international recognition and innovative artistic abilities, but their appreciation became sour as Dylan surpassed them in legend and influence. The feuds were more than just arguments. Like exposed wounds, they cut. Angry altercations in dressing rooms marked the end of friendships that started in smoke-filled cafes. Accusations were sent out into the media by former allies. Additionally, Dylan frequently provided his best effort, which fueled headlines portraying him as both a genius and a demon. Admiration, animosity, and friendship crumbled into rivalry wherever Dylan went. Dylan stood by himself in this battleground of guitars and beliefs, bruised by his words but fortified by his tenacity. Every adversary who attempted to defeat him helped to hone his craft. Behind his public demeanor, Dylan was dealing with his own personal issues. Everything was exaggerated by fame. His difficult love life, his tense familial relationships, and his battle to live in the spotlight all the time. Infidelity, distance, and stress eroding due to touring demands and the turmoil of his inner circle characterized his marriage to Sarah Lowndes. There were arguments behind closed doors, days of stillness, and unopened letters as Dylan sank into his work or disappeared into seclusion. His father was frequently absent and emotionally aloof, and his frequent trips and abrupt disappearances caused his children to grow up in the shadow of scandals. Dylan's strange motorbike accident in 1966, which is surrounded in mystery and conjecture, also caused his health to deteriorate. Some thought it was an actual accident. Some speculated that it was a pretext for a breakdown brought on by drugs, fatigue, and paranoia. For months, he stayed out of the public eye and hid in Woodstock, where the walls of isolation both shielded him and heightened his anxieties. A visit from friends brought back memories of a demon-haunted man. His imagination became entangled with distrust and fear. A brilliant person struggling with vulnerability. The demands of celebrity grew more intense as the years passed. Drug-related rumors followed him from one city to another, supporting the idea that he was a man who was alternating between genius and breakdown. The strain caused his inner circle to shatter. Bandmates and managers got into arguments. Lovers quarreled with one another. Dylan, unable to get out of the mess he had created, stood in the middle. Far from the stage, the guy who appeared to be untouchable was fighting demons, struggling to maintain equilibrium in a life that provided him with everything but required more than one person could bear. Dylan encountered scandal everywhere he went, and he appeared to be pursued like a second skin by the shadows of controversy. He argued with reporters, sometimes scolding them directly and other times leaving them in the middle of an investigation, leaving behind confused rooms and headlines that portrayed him as haughty. Dylan used sarcasm as a weapon, turning press briefings into battlegrounds. He was charged with being conceited, harsh, and manipulating rivals and lovers in backstage hallways and hotel rooms. Even close friends had to be cautious around him because of his erratic mood swings. The picture of a restless, volatile intellect descending into dangerous excess was further enhanced by whispered rumors of excessive drug usage. The rumors that Dylan thrived on turmoil were fueled by stories of late-night binges, whispered paranoia, and creative breakdowns. His savage words destroyed coworkers and turned friends into enemies. After an altercation, Phil Oakes left feeling humiliated, while others were burnt by Dylan's brutal honesty when he was angry. Being close to him was a danger of betrayal for many in the folk and rock industry because of his short fuse and brittle patience. The scandals in private life also increased. His reputation was tarnished by affairs and betrayals, leaving behind lovers who talked of his unpredictable nature and isolation. He was surrounded by rumors of love liaisons with singers and muses, and his marriage became into a battleground of suspicion and secret. From New York to London, gossip columns and whispered conversations were fueled by Dylan's personal troubles, his failure to strike a balance between celebrity and intimacy, and his restlessness that shattered stability. Dylan was as challenging as he was intelligent for many. A man whose music created bridges but whose life destroyed them as soon as they were constructed. He appeared to be the epitome of contradiction, brilliant and self-destructive, kind and harsh, charismatic and antagonistic. Instead of being incidental to his biography, the scandals and shadows played a major role in shaping the myth. Every rumor, betrayal, and strained friendship contributed to the sense of peril that surrounded Dylan, making him equally feared and admired. In retrospect, Dylan's experience in the folk scene of the 1960s was more about survival than unification. Surrounded by adversaries and doubters, he carved out his legacy via jealousy, treachery, and resentment. Dylan frequently stood alone among the so-called community of folk singers, which was actually a battleground of egos and beliefs. Nevertheless, he created some of the best music of the 20th century as a result of these disputes, scandals, and strained relationships. However, the finished image is not straightforward. Envision Dylan at the intersection of his own legend, conscious of the wounds caused by each friendship that evolved into a conflict. He was toughened rather than destroyed by other people's resentment. Every betrayal served as inspiration for songs that changed the folk genre as well as the music business as a whole. Every song included a recollection of struggle, of arguments in smoke-filled apartments, of lovers who turned against one another, of critics who laughed before his brilliance hushed them. Dylan's survival was actually a defiant act. The folk scene's supposed jerks attempted to restrain him, but their own petty behavior exposed them more than it hurt him. Dylan himself persevered, scarred, complex, and stronger as a result of all his hardships. The untouchable icon myth was based on disorder rather than harmony. Dylan left behind music that would never be forgotten on a battlefield where he emerged both wounded and triumphant. Dylan's existence in the 1960s was characterized by this dichotomy. He was crowned by the same conflicts and scandals that threatened to destroy him. And as the years went on, the songs persisted even as the bees and jealousies diminished. The folk scene was ultimately never a family. It was a conflict.